Joining us right now, as promised, Congressman Jodey Arrington. Good morning, Congressman. You're on KFYO with Rob Snyder and Matt Martin.
Matt, Rob, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to be with you.
Where are you in D.C. today or in the district?
I'm in D.C. today. We've got a vote tonight and a bunch of meetings leading up to that. So, wish I could be there. Here we've gotten plenty of rain lately.
Yeah, it's kind of the funny thing that happens during Fair Week. You get the Panhandle South Plains Fair for about 10 days, and then we end up getting a barrage of rain as well.
We need to have that fair more often.
Right.
Or different time of year.
Well, maybe in the middle of July would be good, too.
Different time of year.
Let's change the date on it.
So,
well, what a sad deal last night. I got to say, my heart is heavy. You just can't even fathom some crazy person doing that, and but it's just hard to prevent somebody from doing that, especially from that. I don't think we've seen this vantage point where the shooter was, sitting up over the crowd, just having a shooting spree. God bless those families and those victims, and just my heart breaks for them.
Yeah, I mean the shooter with his vantage point on the 32nd floor of Mandalay Bay. I mean, he probably had everything just in suitcases when he was going up to the room. Fox News now says over 400 people transported to Las Vegas hospitals due to this unfortunate incident. Back in some news from Washington D.C., Congressman, the tax reform plan, some of the framework was released last week as far as the discussion points of it. I guess two questions on that. One, what are your initial thoughts? And then two, have you been privy to any of the details that could potentially make their way into a bill?
Well, we've talked. The details are going to be hammered out. Framework is pretty broad and I think broadly accepted by the president, the leadership of the House and Senate. But the devil's in the details here, because we've got to have a pay for this. If we're going to make the tax cuts permanent, then you've got to have it can't be deficit. It has to be deficit neutral. So you got to have a way to pay for it. And healthcare was going to provide $1 trillion, and that debacle has made it more challenging. And I say debacle in the Senate because we had our healthcare bill out of the House in May. But no, we got to get this economy growing. We have to get more money into the pockets of our middle and working class people and our families, and give a incentive for small, medium, and large businesses alike to invest, grow, and create jobs. That's what this is about. And again, everybody's for that. The question is, do you take away the tax deduction for local and state taxes? That's going to penalize folks from New York and California and others states. Do you take the exemption for property tax, which affects states like Texas? Those are the things we've got to hammer out. But in general, we've got to deliver on this as a Republican-led conference in the House and Senate. This is the president's number one agenda item, as he's made very clear. And again, for the working and middle-class people who've seen wages essentially flat for decades, this is our, I think, best shot at giving them more discretionary money and improvement of their quality of life.
Congressman, one of the things that the president kind of talked about what he wanted to do was simplify the tax code. Is this going to do that, or is this just going to be kind of like a tax cut to get the economy going?
That's a good question, but the goal is to simplify and to make it where 9 out of 10 Americans can fill out their taxes on the back, of a postcard. That's the goal. We believe we can get there because you're going to have to take away. So if you lower rates enough, you don't have to have these tax credits and deductions. And there are special interest loopholes that need to be closed. So I think the commitment is there to not just to flatten and to make it more fair, but to simplify, and that burden will be felt by everybody, the average American especially. So, no, that commitment's there. We talked a lot about that on last Wednesday at the retreat.
Congressman Jodey Arrington with us right now on KFYO. We'll go ahead and take our first break, and when we come back, Congressman, we'll talk a little bit more about this potential tax bill and also the U.S.'s relief efforts in Puerto Rico. KFYO News Time is 7:42. 7:45 News Talk 95.1, 790 KFYO. I'm Rob Snyder filling in for Dave King along with Matt Martin. We're continuing our weekly interview with Congressman Jodey Arrington. And Congressman, I was reading a Business Insider story that had come out last week discussing the potential framework of the tax cut plan that of course, the president is pushing. And it was saying that for single filers, brackets could potentially be 12%, 25%, and 35%. From what you've been told, is that a potential framework for some of the reworking for the federal income tax brackets?
Yeah, that's correct. They basically everybody goes down. The tax brackets are compressed. The biggest winners there would be the lowest income, who go from 10 to 0. So people talk about 3 brackets, but it's really 4 in that the last one. So you have one that goes from 15 to 12, and then you've got one that drops from 10 to 0. And then you double standard deduction, which means you're not paying taxes on twice as much of your income that you did before. Now, that sounds good, but I got to tell you, my philosophy is we need significant tax cuts for everyone, okay? And we need to especially make sure the middle and working class folks who typically get the raw end of the deal, they keep more of their money, their wages go up, they get better jobs, all of that. But everybody should pay something. That's a starting, fundamental principle for me. Too many people in this country, and I'm not talking about the retired folks who've worked and paid their whole lives. I'm talking about folks who get from the government and don't put back into it. That's not healthy. We need everyone to have ownership over the future of this country. So I don't care whether you drop the last bracket from 10 to 1 or 10 to 2 or 10 to 0.2 or 0.1, but everybody should pay something. I think that's a fair deal, and I think it just allows everybody to have skin in the game. That's healthy for a better, stronger future for this country.
So, and as far as that's concerned, one thing, I've got children, so it's nice having it, but you've got like the child income credit, the earned income credit, which can actually mean that the government is paying you if you're in that 0 tax bracket. And so is that something they're going to be looking at maybe changing, or is that something they're going to keep around?
Well, they talked about having a marriage and family credit, and then of course you have the child tax credit. That we didn't get into the details of it. They're not going to take it away, it appears. Which again, I'm for incentivizing, or strengthening families by lowering their tax burden, but I'm not for paying people who don't pay any taxes for having more children. That's just, I can't even get my head around that as a policy that is good for this country and fair to the folks who are out there working to pay taxes, who may have children and may not have children. Again, lower taxes for everybody, especially married people, families. I'm all for lowering the tax burden, just not for people not paying anything. We need, as they say, more makers than takers, and everybody ought to be able to make some contribution to this great country.
People with a little skin in the game.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Congressman, one of the other big federal stories from this past week has been relief efforts from the U.S. to Puerto Rico after the hurricane that recently passed through there. I guess, what are your thoughts on what the U.S. has done for that, and then also your thoughts on the president's back and forth through social media with Puerto Rico's elected officials?
Well, the mayor of San Juan, I get it. My last stint in the Bush administration was the long-term rebuilding of the Gulf after Katrina. It wasn't the early aftermath. It wasn't FEMA, but you could just, there's just such a desperation when people have lost everything. And I don't think even New Orleans and even the Gulf Coast here in Texas can compare to what has happened in Puerto Rico. The first female Republican congresswoman from Puerto Rico is a friend of mine, and she's a new member and sort of classmate. And my heart goes out to them. But it's tougher. The infrastructure, cell phone towers. I mean, it's hard to get this. It's going to be hard to get this country back on its feet. And it was already, as they say, it was already in the ICU before this storm came in terms of their, financial stability. So it was already weak and sick when it got hit. And I just going to be frustrating for the local folks. And the mayor, I think, is just, she sees the desperation, she feels it, and she feels out of control, and she's lashing out. I expect that kind of stuff.
Do you think at some point Puerto Rico's status needs to be fully addressed with the U.S. to where either they become a state and then fully pay all, have citizens pay federal income taxes, or become their own independent country to where they're, standing and sitting on their own as far as financially and with infrastructure and everything without everything else?
Well, I think that conversation's going to be now front and center, I think, because of this. I think that right now, I think they have to own their own situation in some respects. We're not going to come in and bail them out, because what will happen is you create a moral hazard. And I'm talking about their financial situation, because the next state that will follow suit will be California. And then we'll just set a precedent that if you run up your bills and can't pay them, and you borrow and you're over leveraged, and you offer all these entitlement programs like free education in California, then we're going to come in and Big Brother is going to take care of you. I don't think that's going to sit well with freedom-loving Texans and other fellow Americans across the country. There's a way to help them without bailing them out, but I do think that conversation is a healthy conversation to have. Are they going to pay into the system, and is their status going to change going forward? But right now, it's all about getting these guys taken care of and not losing any more lives, and getting the hospitals and other infrastructure up and running. I think that's the focus. But good question, and I think a conversation piece for the months ahead.
7:53 on News Talk 95.1, 790 KFYO. One more segment with Congressman Jodey Arrington. We'll get a check of weather next. 7:57 News Talk 95.1, 790 KFYO. This is KFYO Mornings. I'm Rob Snyder, filling in for Dave King, along with Matt Martin, wrapping up our discussion with Congressman Jodey Arrington.
Congressman, we only have about 2 minutes left. Is there anything you want to talk about?
Well, thanks. There's a couple of bills that we're voting on this week. One, and I'm introducing one of the bills, is the Veteran Apprenticeship and Labor Opportunity Reform Act. That's the VALOR Act. My colleague from California, Democrat, who introduced the term limit bill with me, Ro Khanna, we're trying to make it easier, not harder, taking the burden off of companies that offer apprenticeship programs for veterans. So very proud of that. I think that'll make its way to the president's desk, and we'll do another reform for our beloved veterans. So that I'll just leave it at that, since in the interest of time. But very pleased that Ro Khanna and I are back doing bipartisan work for our veterans.
And just briefly, with the on the federal tax reform bill, do you think a bill will get put in the House this week, or maybe in the next few weeks?
We're talking a few weeks. We're trying to have something done into the president by the end of the year. I think that's doable. The wild card is always the Senate, and I don't think I need to rail on the Senate any more than I already have. And but they've got to decide if they're going to be part of delivering for a better future and a more conservative agenda for this country, since we're in power.
Right. Congressman Jodey Arrington, thank you for your time today. Always great talking to you, and we'll talk to you again here in a few weeks.
Likewise, guys. Thanks a lot. God bless West Texas.
Thank you, Congressman.